So remember we talked about line, we've talked a little bit about shape, and you've practiced some of those things. This is a piece by an artist called Henri Matisse, and we would say Henry Matisse. He was French. So Henry Matisse is famous for these really basic shapes. When you see a shape like this in the bottom left corner that is kind of wobbly and wonderful like this, we always think of Henry Matisse. So if you see something like that in a piece of art, it's either inspired by Henry or created by Henry or Henri. So he uses those shapes over and over and over again to kind of create a repetition, but they're a little different each time. So differences in art means variety. So keep that in mind as we talk about, and later we'll talk about variety in art. But variety just means varied or a lot of differences. So Henri Matisse here also has, along with these kind of shapes, he has geometric shapes. So he's got a lot of squares, and then he has squares built on top of squares, and then behind squares and kind of stacked. And eventually all these squares are coming together to create one big basic rectangle. Okay, and you can see that he's got two columns here, okay, creating a rectangle. You see a lot of different shapes. This white shape in the top corner on the right is kind of a shape, two shapes like that. Reminds me of a clamshell. And the reason I say that is because if you look at this and you look at this shape and some of the other varied shapes, you kind of start thinking of under the water or in the sea. And this is actually called beasts of the sea. So you see some kind of weird fish maybe, or a school of fish with all these triangles together. Could be a school of fish. And I don't know what he was thinking. I'm just guessing. But you kind of have some, also you have some swirled shapes like this that could be currents of the sea, or it could be a jellyfish. It could be all kinds of things. So I'm just guessing guessing about what those things are. But the title of the painting gives us a big clue about beasts of the sea. So I want you to see how Henri or Henry Matisse is using shapes, and they're varied. And he's got a combination of geometric shapes and organic shapes, and he's combined them in a very interesting way. Let's look at another piece by Henri Matisse. And later we're going to talk about how to tell a story in art. And this actually kind of tells a story. This is capturing the essence or the basics of a story about a man named Icarus in Greek mythology. And Icarus kind of wanted to show off, and he said, I can fly. So everybody said, yeah, right. So he built these wings out of wax, and he's proved that he could fly by flying. And then he decided that he would really do a great job and fly to the sun. So the closer he got to the sun, the meltier his wings got, right? And so this is called the fall of Icarus, and this is Icarus falling through the blue sky. And in my mind, I'm seeing these flashes of the yellow, those kind of weird shapes, again, Henri Matisse shapes of real irregular shapes. Could be as he's flying and falling and turning over. Every time he turns over, he kind of gets a glimpse of the sun, maybe. That's, again, just my interpretation. But what I want you to see is how Henri Matisse captures the essence of a story in this piece. Now, remember earlier we talked about a line being the edge of something. So here you have the edge of Icarus right here. So the edge of where the black stops and the blue starts has a sense of line. But Henri Matisse has cut it out into a shape, very organic shape. The only thing that here is not organic is the little red circle by Icarus, and then the frame, the overall frame of the whole piece seems to be, or is, a rectangle. So the shape of the artwork could be geometric or organic or irregular, like we talked about before. So here we have a very different piece by Claude Monet. Claude Monet painted the same thing over and over again, and if you look up Monet's train stations, you'll see a lot of variations of the same piece. But what I want you to see here, remember we talked about implied line, and if you look at the edge right here of the train station, and here's the edge, and here's the edge of that roof, we know behind that smokestack or the puffs of smoke coming out of the train is the real edge of the whole train station. Our brain finishes that line for us. That's what I mean by implied line or closure. Now, implied shape, if you take this shape again and come down the train station and this whole little grouping of people and the sidewalk comes over, up, and down. And we have an implied shape here too. It's not an outlined shape, it's broken in places, and it doesn't even create a shape down at the bottom, but those masses of people and then the lights and the darks gives us what we call an implied shape as well. This painting is called Spring Thunderstorm by Charles Burchfield. And you have a whole lot of different kinds of lines here. You've got some vertical lines here along the bottom for the fence, and some of them get very faded and disappear. You have some curved lines in the trees going through it. And then the rain itself is creating a diagonal. And again, a lot of implied lines with the diagonals. The trees are very curved. Look at the repeating lines in the roof of this house over here to create it. You've got diagonals on the roof of the house. You have a vertical line in the steeple right here, a strong vertical line right here. And then you have some horizontal lines, not really very many horizontal lines in this. But you have a lot of movement in here. And what creates that movement is the repetition. Look how this curve is repeated. Okay, repeated means over and over again. And you have those same smaller curves in this tree, and down here and here. And then on top of it, with the diagonals, you have a lot of movement. The rain is moving and the wind is moving, and the clouds even capture that movement with those areas of implied line. So Charles Burchfield pulls it all together here. I want you to start being aware of how an artist uses line and shape in their artwork to create different effects. Here, he's using line and shape to create the effect of a thunderstorm or movement. The sky is moving and the trees are moving and the rain is moving. So he's creating a sense of movement here. And he also is creating the sense of a storm by the colors he's using and the lines and the shapes that he's using. So start being aware and looking at artwork and looking for the way the artist is using lines and shapes.